for the pharmaceutical industry, but also for regulatory processes. For the regulatory process, I would like to thank you, the COFEPRIS representative, and also Mrs. Rees, also she comes from COFEPRIS. Over 6 months ago, when we were submitting the results of the access results, we were showing that patients in Mexico, they took 3.4 years to get innovating treatment. And the executive director of COFEPRIS, who was with us at that time before in the press conference, he acknowledged the idea of reducing all those times. And he put forward that the basis was international reliance of collaboration in between regulators to speed up the time. I am very pleased to have this person with us today to follow this topic, and I will give the floor to Fernando Fon. Thank you so much, Cristobal. Good morning, all of you. It's truly for me a true honor to have you all in the first panel, as Cristobal was saying, the third day of work of Innovation Week of AMIF 2022. The first way to initiate this morning is to talk about a central core and topic. All you agree, I'm sure, that by talking about the health of people, the starting point is actually the health and regulatory framework. We couldn't just consider innovation, pharmaceutical innovation, to health professionals without having a sanitary health regulatory system that might allow to go for this research and development stage under the scrutiny, very stringent scrutiny in terms of technical and also what is involved for medication, and that is for health purpose. I feel very proud, very pleased to be able to introduce this group of members of the panel. They will be gladly sharing the aspects that had to do with these mechanisms that might allow collaboration and cooperation among the different sanitary agencies and the pharmaceutical sector. This is one of the highest regulated sectors, and they will be actively engaged and productively under the head of the sanitary agencies to collaborate, to make it able to enable the pharmaceutical innovation to be available on a timely basis for the right patient, as usually we said in the medical areas in regards to the different interventions. I would like to introduce now, with one intervention, all our members of the panel. And in order to give the floor to the first speaker, we will try to be within the timeline that we have agreed with. This is going to be the first introduction and elaboration that will give a viewpoint from what we are going to talk about. Then we will have a Q&A session that might allow us to agree about what might be all these actions that will take place once this conversation will be completed. I would like to introduce Nathan Enriquez. He's the Commissioner of Sanitary Sector. He is on behalf of the COFEPRIS representative to start with this panel. Then we will have the participation of Alexandra Vaz. She represents the European Medication Agency, and we thank her for being with us today for this activity during this AMIF week of innovation. And then we will go back to Carlos Garnica. He is Under Director of International Area at COFEPRIS. And then we will have the opportunity to listen on behalf of IFMA, Cristina Mota, and on behalf of EPIA, these two organizations of pharmaceutical representation internationally, to Camila Gomez. She will be talking about the industry And I would like to give the floor to Nathan, Dr. Nathan. He will be the first speaker. Dr. Nathan, it's a pleasure to have you here during this week from AMIF. He says, hi, hello, how are you, Eduardo? Thank you all people who are virtually listening this participation. COFEPRIS is important, you know, to be able to have the opportunity to give an idea of what is going on regulatory terms for pharmaceutical innovation. And on my behalf, I would like to send you my greets from Mr. Eduardo Paz. He, based on his current dynamics, we work together on a bilateral basis to be able to build different innovations, actually in what has been transformed at COFEPRIS level. So I would like you to give us the opportunity to share my screen for this presentation. Well, while this is happening, I want to add that our participation is depending upon what, as a regulatory agency, we have go forward in what is new molecules, I'm sorry. And as Fernando was saying, Carlos Garnica, he will be talking about the viewpoint of reliance of COFEPRIS and important memberships that as a regulatory agency we have in regards what is this global regulation and that we need to implement, especially at this period post C19. Trying to just fit to this timeline, well, the Committee of New Molecules is an advisory committee, so to speak, an ancillary committee, okay? This is a sector that allows the regulatory agency to be able to have an opinion, which is a very deep opinion, wider, broader opinion, with more expertise in regards to what has to do with, to set the authorization in the case of pharmaceutical products and medical devices as well. And recently also, we included it in order to, during the pandemic period, we review the protocols and research for the human use. Okay, next slide, please. There is no problem at all, actually. I have been explaining so far what is. Here is the definition of this new molecule committee. And he says how we have been able to optimize this new molecule committee. We know this committee by having this element of support for COFEPRIS. It might become a constraint for the moving forward and the access of health for all these inputs that we have for that matter. What we do is to generate in 3 circles some optimization elements. In the case of prioritization of approach, we try to put together all these criteria that might help us to speed up according to public health demand is pointing out. You have been witness, I'm sure, that how in the last few years these inputs in terms of COVID had been prioritized. We have all these, as we call, orphaned elements, and we give them the priority once that we have created these three elements, two first in, first out, according to that method. What we try to do is to implement simplification in all senses, in all the processes of COFEPRIS. In the case of new molecules, it has been possible to standardize the virtual communication. So it has allowed us to have these dynamics of being able to meet these ordinary, regular production, but to be able to create some extraordinary sessions in case that there is another molecule that is really, really more important, and to provide all these strategic elements. So we have some meetings with other subcommittees for assessment that allows us to provide faster elements. Not to try to start on the red paper problem. We have been able to simplify the inclusion of experts because at the beginning we have lots of experts being part and involved of it. This was slowing down the dynamics in regards of solution. But now we are looking for the involvement of experts and the creation of staff, technical, scientific staff within the committee might allow us to go beyond a favorable opinion, to have these technical elements that might provide some foundation to the participation of this committee for the final person who will authorize or not this medication. And we have been able to simplify all the processes of these medications that had been pre-authorized by other agencies. I will delve in that later on. Transparency is an element that will that becomes very important. This is something that we are following under this government. We have to inform all these stakeholders about the publication and everything, and the final ruling, expert ruling that has been achieved. In general, what we have are two mechanisms which are very open in terms of approval of new products. When we already have an approval by an acknowledged regulatory agency, what we do is that we have an assessment with documents that might allow to access this special technical opinion that does not require the whole process, that usually needs to be followed with a product that has not a previous authorization by another agency. So the process becomes very fast and speedy. It goes through a scientific and investigation and review, and then we submit the final decision. We don't have to wait for a timeline or from the committee to be able to review it and to give the final opinion. This is something that we are doing when we do not have any previous authorization. I'm going to show you next one. Finally, I want to talk about what happened during this last year. On this COFEPRIS administration, it has been possible for us to have an assessment by considering the acknowledgement of agencies. I'm sorry. of equivalent products with countries with whom we have this approved regulatory framework. Australia and Canada, those are the countries that belong to EMA and the FDA, and with the SUIS agency. This has allowed us to generate or to abate the backwardness that we had before and allow us to follow as fast as possible and to be able to be at the same level of the challenge that is for us to be a member of ICHA, that is giving us the roadmap to have all these very fast approval, with the possibility of Mexico to become a regulatory agency with more availability in terms of health, not just for Mexico, but also for the region. So this is all, and if you want to have a comment or question, it's all right. Thank you, Dr. Nathan. This Committee of New Molecules, we are identified from the pharmaceutical sector as the gateway for all these regulatory processes, and we have been able to participate in a very actively way, very closely, in this process of transformation of this committee. And undoubtedly, all this backwardness that, as you mentioned, has been identified of pending application for this committee, this has been solved mostly with positive opinions on behalf of the committee, and also the companies and the CEOs had been able to submit it through the different files and documents. We know that many efforts have taken place as well in order to take full advantage of these new capabilities of this committee and all the elements of good international practices that you already mentioned. And I am sure that this will become, in a fast issuance of all these files, sanitary files, that will make available all these medications for people who really need it. Thank you for your participation. So Alexandra Vaz from the European Agency is going to present this. Welcome, Alexandra. You have the floor.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm really glad to be here, and thank you, Ami, for the invitation to speak here today. I'm really glad. And also, I would also to thank to the other panelists that I have the pleasure to share this panel today. Without no further delays, I would like to request the production to actually concede me the rights to present my screen. Yes. Okay, so thank you very much once again for the invitation to speak here. And today the focus of my presentation will be on reliance as a regulatory tool to earlier access to medicines. So reliance is a pathway to regulatory standards convergence. And how does this actually work? So reliance allows regulatory authorities to take into account scientific assessments performed by other regulatory authorities as part of their own regulatory decision-making. In addition to regulatory approvals, reliance can also be applied to regulatory procedures. For instance, certificates of pharmaceutical products, or the so-called CPPs. These certificates are issued by EMA, and they ensure the approval status of the medicine, and also they certify on the compliance of the good manufacturing practices of the medicine itself. Besides that, we can also apply reliance to inspections, which reduces the workload not only for regulators but also for industry. The exchange of information through reliance increases trust between regulators and fosters the level of convergence and harmonization of regulatory requirements. To help on the establishment of reliance throughout all the countries, WHO has issued a good reliance practices guidance on the 29th of April of 2021. The link is here. If I believe that you will also have access to this presentation after, you can look into more detail afterwards. But basically this guidance establishes a framework so that regulators can rely on and can look at so that they can use reliance. But now I will be more focused on how does this actual reliance look like in practice. So at EMA, we established several procedures in order to enhance the use of the concept of reliance. The first one is called EU Medicines for All, or former Article 58. Here, EMA evaluates and gives an opinion in cooperation with WHO. On medical products for human use intended for markets outside the EU. Also, non-EU regulatory authorities are able to collaborate in this assessment. And the benefit risk evaluation targets the intended non-EU populations where the companies want to submit the marketing authorizations. Here, we ensure that the same standards that we use for EMA are used in the EU Medicines for All procedure. And the licensing decision is taken independently by non-EU regulators in their countries. So we know that the concept of reliance is being applied. Since 2021, this procedure can also be performed in parallel to a centralized procedure to accelerate medicines access at a global scale. So in 2021, we were able to create a procedure where the medicine that goes through EU Medicines for All is also being centrally approved here in the EU. So in the end, the company will enable to market this medicine in the EU and also outside the EU. As of January 2022, 5 medicines are still holding a EU Medicines for All scientific opinion in 79 countries worldwide, with a total of 127 marketing authorizations. And as you can see in the map, the impact of the EU Medicines for All is at a global scale. With the EU Medicines for All, these medicines have been approved in Latin American countries, in Africa, and also in Asia. The second reliance procedure that I wanted to talk to you about is called Stringent Regulatory Authority Collaborative Registration Procedure, or the so-called SRA-CRP. This procedure is a WHO procedure where EMA participates as a stringent regulatory authority. Here, we aim to accelerate national approvals in countries where resources may be limited based on the regulatory work already carried out by the regulatory authorities such as EMA. So EMA or any other reference authority shares assessment reports that can be used by other regulatory authorities who can use them but keep their own regulatory and decision-making responsibilities. With this, with the use of the SRA-CRP, we are contributing to the ultimate goal of facilitating earlier access to essential medicines for patients worldwide, improving global public health, but also providing capacity building for local national regulatory authorities, since these national regulatory authorities interact with the assessment reports and the logic behind the development and the assessment at EMA. As of December 2021 and since 2015, which was when the procedure was created, 9 medicines with an EU marketing authorization were approved under SRA-CRP in 23 countries worldwide, with a total of 57 marketing authorizations. The last procedure that I wanted to talk to you about is called Open. This procedure aims to happens when non-EU experts take part in EMA scientific assessments of COVID-19 products while keeping full scientific and regulatory independence. The participating countries of this initiative are the Australian Regulatory Authority, the Canadian Regulatory Authority, the Japanese, the Swiss, and also WHO. The drivers for the development of this initiative are sharing scientific expertise, tackling common challenges, and enhancing transparency on regulatory decisions. Experts in the Open Initiative, they keep full scientific and regulatory independence, and they participate under existing confidentiality arrangements with no role in the benefit risk decision that is taken at the committee that issues the scientific opinion for the approval of medicines in the EU, which is the CHMP. For you to have an example, a practical example of how Open Initiative works and the impact that the Open Initiative has, the WHO emergency using list for one vaccine led to more than 100 approvals within 2 weeks, based on this EMA collaborative assessment. So we can see that there is a huge impact and there is a huge benefit for the patients worldwide from regulators using this procedure. Finally, I wanted to talk to you about the International Coalition of Medicines Regulatory Authorities, or the so-called ICMRA. Here, we have informal group of heads of medicine regulatory authorities that provide strategic directions for enhanced collaboration, improved communication, and approaches to jointly address common challenges. We have representation from across all continents and regions, as you can see in the map in blue. And we also have regular policy teleconferences and workshops, ensuring the sharing of information between regulators and promote convergence in regulatory approaches. Through this forum, collaboration between regulators for the development of frameworks that support the management of a global health crisis can be created, which is much important for global health crisis as Zika and COVID-19 more recently. To conclude my presentation, if there's one thing that COVID-19 pandemic has showed to us is that international collaboration is needed now, and it will be much more needed in the future. And Reliance has a simple, useful, and flexible tool for better cooperation is being used and should be used in the future. With transparency, has an with an openness to dialogue and sharing being one of the key points for this use of Reliance. And by using Reliance, and we increase trust on other regulators, and this leads to being more open and more transparent, and also accepting challenges for the benefit of regulators in the industry who can avoid duplication of work, and also for the benefit of patients who can have earlier access to high quality, safe and effective medicines. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias. And I would like also to thank Martin Harvey for his support during the development of this presentation. Thank you very much.
Alexandra, muchísimas gracias por esta.
Thank you very much for this presentation, and take us hand in hand with this, a very good example, as you already mentioned, by closing your presentation, up to where we can reach with collaboration among agencies, institutions, and also the participants of the sector that requires a common communication in between the people who are in charge and people who receive the benefits. Thank you for all this, especially this tool of reliance that will be for the great benefit of humankind. These approvals might always will become very close to timeline and to timely use, especially under a time of emergency, which that time that we are going through. Of course, this is not going to be the last one, but this is a good way to go forward. And under normal situations, we know that we can have a common collaboration among the stakeholders for a common benefit, which is world human population for each and every one of the countries. Thank you, Alexandra. I'm going to ask chemist Carlos Garnica, please share with us your view from this important topic and the works that have been taken place by COFEPRIS recently in regards to this subject matter. Welcome, chemist Carlos. He is the Under Director of International Area at COFEPRIS. Carlos says, good morning. Thank you very much, Fernando. I am so pleased to be here with you today and to share all this panel with great speakers. As you were saying, and as Alexandra was saying, the reliance is very important at the present time. My presentation is going to be focused on that. If you allowed me, I will share my screen and I will show you exactly what I mean by all these points. Okay, good. Well, good morning again. As I was saying, I would like now to start my presentation by giving you a general view how we find ourselves at present time in regards to this situation of pandemic. This is a regulatory viewpoint by facing pandemic situation. Well, you see here, this is the regulatory scenario, and is divided into two pathways. The first one, human resources, where, as an agency, regulatory agency, we had to make it fit to a hybrid home office situation and hybrid work. For some of the agencies, well, it was something new. We have some constraint of staff. Unfortunately, we had to dismiss some people, and it was impacting each one of the areas. And also, we have the work atmosphere, since we did not know what will happen, how this pandemic was going to develop, if everything was under control, if there was a medication or not. And on the other hand, it was a sanitary regulation where we have the right mechanisms, traditional approval mechanisms, which in a way made us to view which were the priorities. And also we have the capacity to react from these authorities. And also I would like to add that we need to view and set the right actions for us to meet the needs that were emerging at that time. And finally, the simplification of regulation, which this part of simplification allows us to have favorable benefits in a short term and include some terms which are important. And I will try to embrace them all. Also, Alejandra from IMA was already talking about that, which is harmonization, convergence, and reliance. Now here you see which are the definitions of each one of them. These definitions, you might find it on the document that Alexandra was pointing out on behalf of IMA. And I would like to explain to you each one of them. We have convergence. Convergence means the identification of synergy and also the way that authorities are involving. And this comes from PAHO and from WHO. Also, we have harmonization. Harmonization is the alignment of local norms with international standards. according to the practices. A clear example is ICH, that also we will be talking about this. And finally, we have reliance. Reliance is the means through which we bear in mind all these assessments of one authority for the decision-making of another. I want to add that reliance has 5 basic principles, which are sovereignty, transparency, consistency, competence, and legal base. If you want to know more about this term, reliance, as Alexandra was pointing out from IMA, we have a guideline that has been published by WHO. You will find more information about it. Next one, please. Now here, in this same sense, and talking about the principles of reliance, we have 4 fundamental pillars. One of them is efficacy. That means to increase efficiency, to get rid of duplicity from authorities. To be efficient, that means to make the best use of resources, human and financial. And also it should be a facilitator. That means that it should facilitate the access to these safe and efficacious quality medications, and harmonization, which means the alignment for international guidelines. We should bear in mind and to keep a constant commitment for this reliance. Which are the benefits of reliance? Well, first of all, is to be more agile, to speed up. And also we have to have how to appoint all these resources to strategic areas of institution, to have timely access to innovating treatment. It endorses quality, efficacy, and safety. And also, it might alleviate the risk of out of stock that might come as a result of other situations. So international presence of COFEPRIS, it revolves around these great areas. We have, for example, bilateral relationships with different countries, as well as we promote the participation in fora and international organizations in terms of regulatory harmonization. Here you can see all this involvement that we have internationally in different fora as APEC, IPRSP, IMRA, PICS, and APEC, and also agencies, international agencies as UN and FAO and PAHO, among others, and which it has some relationship in terms of the agreement signed with other agencies. So with this slide, I want to show you the big collaboration work that has taken place internationally by this federal agency, COFEPRIS. In that sense, well, I try to represent some fora where we are so proud to be a member of. One of them is cooperation, and in PICS, which is a review and inspection. We are members in 2018. Which are the benefits of being part of this forum? Well, we have an exchange of information, training. We participate in the creation of best practices in the guidelines and other memberships that we achieve as COFEPRIS. It was last year, specifically, November 2021, was that part about ICH, where one of these benefits was to promote public health by harmonization of requirements that might make agile the access of new medication and availability for population. And the last one that we are not just still members of this agency, but still we try to make our best to be part of it, which is as MDSAP, medical advice single medical program, and as a benefit will reduce these resources from the manufacturing in terms of auditing processes, and also to create some criteria, common criteria to serve inspection and audit processes. As you see, This is a very general view, together with what we already have, as Dr. Nathan and Alexandra already mentioned, that actually the fact of being part of Reliance will provide us big benefits. And I think that the pandemic situation that has gone through 2 years has made us, all authorities, regulating authorities, to see and to get that approach and to align ourselves in that sense. Well, these are the next steps. We have to see which are the next steps of our commission in regards to membership that we got recently from ICMCH, to innovate and optimize our regulatory processes, including clinical research, and also to harmonize technical criteria, and also to integrate an official norm for good clinical practices in clinical research, to implement a communication program in all these sectors involved, which is necessary to have a synergy, as we heard before, in between regulators and stakeholders, and to move forward for the implementation of ICH technical guidelines. With this slide, I complete my presentation, and I will be just looking for any remark that you might have. Thank you very much, Carlos, for providing all this update of the works that had taken place from the international area of COFEPRIS, looking for creating collaboration spaces with the other entities, institutions, and agencies internationally that might allow us to go forward and to make it easier to adopt the collaboration models, the Reliance, one of them. It's a good example of the work that has taken place. Thank you very much. We are short of time and trying to be able to have a small round of questions and answers. I would like to give the floor to Cristina and Camila. They are on behalf of IFMA and FBIA. They will provide this presentation, sharing the view of this industry that we have been listening. Welcome, Camila and Cristina. Thank you very much, they say, for this opportunity to be a part of this honorable panel as representing International Chamber of Pharmaceutical Industry. And I just want to say that from our viewpoint, I will share with you which are the main difficulties, the main issues that innovation industry is considering as critical that we should face when we work on reliance mechanisms. One of the main topics is the possibility of having this foreseeable view. We have seen that these reliance models have been innovated in different countries. And it's interesting for us to keep on monitoring how these models are implemented in the different authorities. COFEPRIS has had a good experience on reliance since some years ago, and to talk about how the authority can work on thinking about how to implement these models in a very efficient way for other type of procedure. I would like to give the floor to Camila. Maybe she can say, if she can add something else. Hi, I am Camila Gold. I am on behalf of the European agency where I have a seat as chair and coordinator of a regional network that is in charge of LATAM. Thank you, Cristina, for this opportunity. And well, reliance is a very important topic from the viewpoint of the region. For example, the OPS guidelines, they point out that 23% of the American agencies of regulation, including Canada as well, just 1/4, has a mandate or a capacity to fulfill regulatory basic functions in a very integral way or holistic way. So there are 20 countries from our region depend upon some alternative strategies as reliance to be able to reach all these levels of performance. So actually, our regional situation is very critical, which is pointing to the need of regulatory agencies, but seeking alternative ways to might represent more efficiently all this work by reducing the workload of the regulator and also for the regulating agency. Thank you very much. Now, from the viewpoint of convergence and harmonization, we want to congratulate COFEPRIS for the recent membership to ICH, both as SPMA. We are just members and observers from this organization. I would like to mention this opportunity of collaborating in this important initiative in between the pharmaceutical industry and regulators to create some jointly guidelines that might allow efficient optimization in the development of innovative medication and products. Camila, would you like to take the floor? She says, in regards to ICH, we are members, founding members actually, together with the IMA, and which is being represented here. From our viewpoint as members, we believe that the contribution, the most important contribution of ICH, because, well, ICH has been 30 years now operating, and it has a full impact in allowing availability and access to safe, efficacious medications for patients around the world, not just for members of ICH. This was achieved by the development and global adoption of regulatory harmonized standards and norms that has a scientific basis that might guide the development, the scientific process, and the providing of medications in the right way. This ICH and the COFEPRIS, that they have become this gold standard in the definition of risk-benefit analysis. They act as a roadmap, which is very efficacious in the development of all these medications. They support the elimination of clinical trials that are redundant and that standard safety standards are be kept, and improvement a long time with the advancement of knowledge and scientific knowledge. The result then is that they allowed, it's possible to consolidate the trust of people in the products they use, medications that are being developed according to the ICH standards, and they provide an important contribution to public health through ICH. And the fact that the presence of regulators of Latin America is now extending ICH support is very important, and also other international groups that they provide some support to regulators who are members of ICH, also observers and other stakeholders, as the case of IRPA, which is the international group of regulators, and they also have collaboration among members. This is a collaboration among regulators and industry as well. This collaboration has allowed us to have all this involvement and support of ICH and other guidelines and agencies, and allowed negotiators and all these collaborators to be able to increase the process day in, day out. These are the processes that are very, very important to impel regulatory convergence in a global way. And more Latin American countries are part of it, and they have an active voice as well. Thank you very much, Cristina Camila, for allowing us to hear your viewpoint, this value that we have from the innovation that our regulating agencies might have this type of mechanism. These collaboration mechanisms as reliance, but as well this possibility of sharing in a standard way all these technical elements and process that had to do with the development of input of medications for human use, as in the case of recommendations, guidelines that ICH is proposing. And Mexico, fortunately, is working together with them to achieve and to make it possible to go from national to a national framework to an international. I'm going to ask you, each one of you, to please give us a wrap-up, very short wrap-up, and I'm going to ask for an answer to my questions without this meaning that you are not sharing all this knowledge that you have. I would like to start with a question to Dr. Nathan. From your viewpoint of COFEPRIS in the work of reliance, what other models, what other frameworks within this COFEPRIS work you might find feasible to improve getting all these files? In which other framework could this implementation might take place in the case of reliance? Alexandra, please, I want to ask you, in this model that you have been expressing us, collaboration among agencies, what do other agencies need to do to be part of it? To participate in the open model of reliance or to share documents? How can agencies ask IMA or come close to IMA to do this work? That is the question. For Carlos, chemist, I would like to ask you in that sense. Mexico, as ICH member, which are those commitments and responsibilities that COFEPRIS has and that we have as a country, and which might be the participation of the pharmaceutical industry? How can we participate to meet all these responsibilities and commitments that come from it? And Cristina and Camila, I would like to ask you, in that sense, the work, collaboration work, how do you see this from the pharmaceutical sector? How can we collaborate for all these elements of coming together in reliance and implementation, adoption of international standards? Nathan, please, you can answer. He says, yes, gladly, I want to answer your question. Of course. The big challenge of reliance is to be able to have this full acknowledgement among the well-known agencies with which we have, in the case of Mexico, some equivalence to be able to generate a safe gateway to all these inputs that for medication. The most ambitious goals are these inputs for health, not only medications or medicines, but in the case of COFEPRIS, what we call medical devices. Everything that it might involve. It's easy to say that way, but the acknowledgement of new registration and files, but to really talk about what does it mean. This is a big challenge for regulatory agencies. The fact of being able to have the acknowledgement through documentation, parallel documentation among these regulatory agencies. How is it possible to have all these inputs and documents that each one of the agencies need to submit the approval for the medication, and to be able to allow people to have the trust of these medications. This is a big challenge that where COFEPRIS is now working on. We have considered not only to be able to implement it in what means the structure of a new registration, but also to take it further, including, and we have been working with it since some years ago, certificates of good manufacturing or GMPs practices, with all the breakdown it means, and at all the levels that we might take this acknowledgement. So from verification documents and acknowledgement up to an acknowledgement, full acknowledgement of the certificate of good practices to be able to get a new registration. Of the authorities' processes that we follow, and these are part of the certificate of good practices. We have started tapping new ways of implementing reliance. For strategic as inputs, it allows us to set some virtual communication with other regulatory agencies that had allowed us to make the right decision in a very open dialogue among peers that allows us to position ourselves and to debate and discuss how to tackle an input now that we have a big challenge, which is to be able to generate some authorization or regulation in a short time, and with information that is coming out very fast, but not always with all these reliability that we require. So we have to make a decision. Reliance has become then a very good tool to make the right decision within a regulatory agency in this globalized world in regards to technologies that allowed us to implement these interventions to be able to make the right decision, which are more to the point, more aware, and more timely. Thank you, Dr. Nathan. Alexandra, please.
Thank you very much. So what I would first say as a first place is to basically exchange information and documents as much as possible. So, and this through the exchange, through just a communication by email, asking a question on what do you think, how do you usually deal if you were facing this type of situation. This is the first point to actually understand how other regulators internationally work and think in terms of the regulatory field. Besides that, I would also say that, I mean, in EMA, we are very happy to have teleconferences with all the other international regulators if it is required. We are happy to do so, and this also helps not only through emails but also through ad hoc teleconferences to discuss the points that need to be further discussed and cannot be discussed in email. And this is also helps on this exchange of information and views from both sides on how we actually see things and how we can actually improve from both sides. Besides that, I would say that participation in all the multilateral forums that were actually both discussed today, both from my colleagues from COFEPRIS and from colleagues from industry, but participation at ICH, IPRP, PICS, and ICMRA, these forums to actually put regulators getting together and discussing specific topics with specific yeah, and to actually help deal with change, with challenges. It's also a very good point that regulators need to take into account for the future. And finally, the establishment of confidentiality arrangements has, with the confidentiality arrangements, and the EMA has several with several institutions internationally, we are allowed to share assessment reports and to have a more productive discussions with other international regulators. And with this high transparent communication, this enables us to further understand how the others work, how the others think, and most importantly, to actually, when we understand how the others work, we gain trust, and we can actually then apply reliance much more confidently. And that's it from my side. I think that, thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Alexandra.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Just as simple as an email. It's wonderful to listen to that. It allows us to incorporate technology that has allowed these coming close in a very efficient way, more directly. Carlos, chemist, your comment about ICH. He says, thank you so much, Fernando. I will try to go to the point and to abide to the time. Well, next steps, as you were listening when I was introducing everything, is to innovate regulatory processes. How can we do that? How can we innovate in this industry? Well, by having intersectoral and coordination, and to have coordination, and to have all this view, and to have a synergy with the regulator to be able to set a joint work on the two sides. Thank you so much, Carlos. Camila, Cristina, do you have a final comment? Yes, I think it's wonderful what I heard from Carlos. And in that sense, I can give you a viewpoint from a PIA in regards to collaboration with the regulator. So, well, it would be possible to have a summary and to have collaboration on both sides. API and EMA are having a very good communication in Europe, and constantly, regulator and industry, they are concerned to achieve all these consensus through joint participation with international registration, through an open dialogue in international affairs and conferences of DIA, and publication on both sides of common communication, and also public consultation, which are very relevant when we talk about innovation. These are new topics. There should be more joint collaboration strategies, because at the end we understand, and that we have to stress, is that both industry and regulator, we serve through different pathways, but the same patients, our customers. And the nice thing here, as Alexandra just mentioned, this is done not only through in Europe, but through EMA, but also in a global context. And there is a lot of potential regionally and globally speaking for COFEPRIS to be able, with the support of industry, to do the same thing in the region of the Americas and globally as well. From my viewpoint, Camila, I agree with what you said. It sounds very relevant in this new experience of being member of ICH, the potential it brings about to Mexico. The power of innovating industry, local industry, might be there to support the regulator. And this is something really very important. The International Chamber of Pharmaceutical Industry is supporting all these interactions with the idea in mind to bring about, in a very safe and with quality, innovative products to the patients. And I close my presentation. He says, thank you very much, Camila and Cristina, to share your viewpoint from industry. Undoubtedly, I'm writing down to invite you to a new forum so we can talk together. We can talk directly about these collaboration guidelines and these collaboration processes between the collaborator and the negotiator and the person that is a regulator and the final patient. It compels us to work together and to have the best attitude, the best effort by using international standards, by using collaboration mechanisms as we have been listening to this morning. Thank you, all of you, very much. Dr. Nathan, he comes from Sanitary Authorization, Carlos Garnica, Under Director of International Area, Alexandra Vaz from International Area of IMA. Thank you so much. It's an honor to have you all regulators in this forum of innovation, AMIF WIC. And also representatives from EPIA and from IMA, Cristina Camila. It's been an honor to share with you this panel. Have a wonderful, nice day, and see you very soon. Thank you very much. Everyone, it's an honor and a pleasure to be with you today in this panel, which is called Intellectual Property, a Factor to Innovate in Health. Greeting, and I'm very thankful to Chris Thompson, which is the director of AMIF, and Fernando Portugal, for this special invitation to chair this panel. I am Maria Fernanda Hurtado. I am Colombian, but I am 100% from my heart Mexican. I have had the opportunity to visit your country, tour it, with the desire to come back again. And I am astonished by all the people and culture. So there is no better air than Morelia's. But also I represent APEC. We account for 16 associations, local and regional. We work day in, day out by providing the best benefit to the health of patients with the creation of solutions that might allow a very sustainable atmosphere and environment. During the 20th century, the expectation of life had a great increase because of innovation through the intellectual property. During pandemic, according to IMFPA, the protection of intellectual property has allowed technology transfer voluntarily, and associations, partnerships with more than 30, the production of 13 million doses of vaccine, and 2,000 new partnerships have been set, and 155 for new treatment. There have been multiple announcements of partnerships to improve the manufacturing of vaccines. Aside from the challenge of pandemic, one of the objectives of sustainable growth, which is number 3, for 2030 is related to health and well-being, and innovation in pharmaceutical industry is key for the achievement of this goal. In order to talk about this important topic, we have today a panel that is wonderful. We have international experts with interesting views about protection of intellectual property and innovation. I would like to start first. Our first speaker, Mr. Eduardo Velasquillo Herrera, coordinator of strategic planning on behalf of Arterio Rentu, General Director of INPI. And I do have the floor, sir. Thank you very much, Fernanda. Good morning, all of you. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate MF for this week of innovation that has become a tradition in this sector. I would like to convey a greeting from General Director of Mexico Institute of Intellectual Property. I would like to introduce some figures in terms of health in Mexico. Mexican Institute of Intellectual Property receives 32 applications and requests for health. 20% of all these requests that we receive from all. In terms of patents, in between 2018 and 2021, 25 of requests were from sectors as medical technology and pharmaceutical products. In national environment, this proposal of new patents accounted for 50% compared to all of the rest. These figures are very relevant because these are an acknowledgement that innovation and creativity do require the protection of intellectual property, which is the role of industrial property as INPI agencies for the fostering of improving health. That was a question that organizers asked us. The Institute offices has as a main view to set the guidelines and standards to strengthen intellectual property and also to foster innovation. So the users are expecting some flexibility, adaptability, and simplification for an atmosphere and environment that is fast moving and some sound in the abiding of rights. In health, innovation is permanent. This was evident in the last few years facing the COVID pandemic situation. As Fernanda mentioned, not only here, but also in those places where the expectancy of life has increased, for people to live in a very good way, have a quality of life. In health, there are some new ideas that had to do with technology, and it has allowed property, intellectual property, to be protected and to make them available fast. Which are the actions taken by INPI? Well, we have gone through two strategies. The first one has to do with an ordinance of unregulation and meeting its international agreements. As for example, what we have as USMA, MC. The new law for intellectual property that has been approved last year with new practices, and that we have also practices negotiations. And we have adopted new mechanisms to solve these problems. Second strategy was to come close to the user, to provide all these resources, and also to have startups, as improving the digital platform to have all these processes online, and also to allow them to get the patents faster. Together with the USA, this has allowed us to do a better job in terms of patents, especially for special sectors of population, in order to protect good services and whatever they develop. New introduction of principles and mechanisms has allowed us to make it easier for them to go online without exposing people by making them to go to the office. In 2018, only 20% of these patents were online. In 2021, 90% of all these patents are done online. It is the same thing happened for brands. In 2 years to 3 years ago, 20% of them were online. Now it's 80%. The collaboration with the Patent Office and the USPTO has allowed us to reduce the submission of a certificate and title that took 3-4 years, now in 2 years. Focus on special sectors of the population, the Institute has impelled digital of women that want to start up, and this sector has been increasing because we allow them and support them in order to get the patent as fast as possible. Since 2019, Mexico has been, or this institute has awarded a new award for all these proposals. I want to mention all these guidelines and tools that are available for people to make use of. The first one is the seeker of, or the browse that we have for patents, and this allow them to do it faster. People, companies might set the business strategies earlier to bring all these medications to the market through the approval of patent with more transparency. The second browse are all these allopathic medication. The Institute is making available to public all these answers to queries of the federal, national, the COFEPRIS, and this allows to have all this transparency in the answers of INPI in order to make the registration of a medication faster. 2 years after this pandemic situation started, we have been able to. These are important tools that has allowed us to really make it possible. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for these contributions and to make it clear what we were asking in regards to this institute. I have a question for you. This is a very relevant work that you have been sharing. How do you work day in, day out with the private sector, with academia? Do you have some special mechanisms to endorse this dialogue? Well, he says, we have different policies. We have been launching different initiatives. One of them is the network of innovating women. There is an important relationship with them to provide information to women who are starting up. The dialogue that we have with private sector is daily. It takes place on a daily basis. We are, for example, now drafting the regulation of Federal Act, and exchange is very close, very fluid, with all the associations, MP, pharmaceutical industry or sector. Recently, we have been seeking and launching initiatives to support the SMEs, which are companies that they required some financial support. We have tried to support them as much as possible. Thank you very much. And with this, I would like to give the floor now to our second panel from Geneva, the World Intellectual Property Office, WIPO, that we are celebrating on the 26th of April, the day of WIPO. So we have Andreas Jacuti, Director of Patent of the WIPO. Welcome, Andreas. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you very much, Maria Fernanda. I'm unfortunately not hearing the translation, so would you please ask the question in English?
No, basically, Andreas, we are
Thank you very much, Maria Fernanda. I'm trying to share the screen and please confirm whether you are able to see it. Is it working now?
¿Pueden ver la
Yes, it is.
pantalla? Sí, sí está funcionando.
Okay, perfect. So let me present you with a very brief overview of the role of IP in innovation in health from a WIPO
¿Me
perspective.
permiten un segundo? No,
Oh, just a
tenemos que-
second. I probably
Yes.
need to turn off the translation because I'm hearing the Spanish version of myself, even though my...
They need to make me an interpreter again.
Okay.
Give me a second, please. Es que
Alright.
me sacaron de intérprete, me tienen que volver a intérprete de nuevo. Me acaban de... would you please, we have to wait 1 second till the IT department makes me an interpreter.
Okay. Just let me know when I can start. Can I start now? At this point, we don't need English translation, but Spanish, but I shouldn't be hearing it. But you still see my slides, right? And you hear Spanish interpretation and I'm not hearing it. That's great. Is that so, Maria Fernanda?
I'm hearing you well in English, but I'm not hearing the Spanish translation.
Okay. Sorry about that. Just let me know when I can start. I don't want to leave the audience without the Spanish version of my presentation. And sorry for not speaking Spanish. I would love to.
Estamos teniendo, audiencia, un problemita técnico con las traducciones. Denos un segundito y lo estamos solucionando. Muchas gracias a todos por su paciencia.
And I think I will have to accelerate a little bit my presentation now. We are losing precious minutes, but I will be quick. I will not go into the very specific details, but I'm very happy to answer any questions, even in writing after the event.
Andreas lo que está diciendo es que estará muy contento de responder también muchas de sus preguntas, que va a tener que hacer un poquito más de su presentación un poquito más rápida, pero que está súper contento de estar con nosotros el día de hoy y no se va a perder el contenido, así que no se preocupen. Un segundito más.
Thank you for the translation, Maria Fernanda.
Continuamos sin la traducción, por favor. We can continue without the translation, please.
Okay. So I should just give the presentation in English and let's hope that the audience will be able to follow it.
Yes, please.
Okay, not a problem. Thank you, Fernando. So let's just take a deep breath after those technical difficulties, and also let's take a step back a little bit and look at the foundations of IP. I'm promising this will not be an IP 101 course, but I think when we see all the policy debates around intellectual property, and health issues, they all come back to the same questions. So intellectual property has become a very multifaceted legal institution, and we have to see that it's principally a social construct. It's a government-granted exclusivity to exploit a certain invention, a certain creation, a certain design, and so on. It is also a protection, and that's why the shield is on the picture. It is also a protection against misuse, against unauthorized use of the subject matter of intellectual property. And this takes the form of the right to sue, which means that if someone is using intellectual property items without the authorization of the holder, then the holder has the right to sue that person at court. It is working, IP itself is working principally as a reward mechanism, which gives a competitive edge to recoup the investment dedicated to research and development. And as such, it serves as an incentive to innovate. It has become, based on that legal toolkit, it has become also a market tool, which is good to give the advantage to the holder of IP rights and to choose whether they want to use it for exclusion. That's the original nature of IP, but also as a means of cooperation. And this is becoming more and more important as we are tackling global challenges with the help of IP and with the help of rather subject matter that is protected by the tools of IP. But it is also very important to see that IP rights are still territorial, and that's very, very significant in the case of patents, because the patent landscape can become extremely complex based on the different status of IP protection in the different markets in the different territories. It is also, IP is also a business asset. It creates company value, it creates credibility and visibility, but it also contributes to the national economy. But and this is a very strong message that everyone has to understand, that IP rights can be strong, and it's widely assumed that strong IP rights are good for innovation, but they are always qualified by the public interest. And this is reflected in many, many aspects of the IP system in every single country, meaning every national legislation can determine the preconditions of protection, their limitations in time. The disclosure requirement is extremely important because it means that after the expiry or lapse of patent protection, all the information in the patent application or in the granted patent becomes publicly available as a part of the public domain. And also the exceptions and limitations that are available in every patent system that ensure that the public interest is also served by the institution. But getting a little bit more into answering the real question, so IP driving health innovation. Health innovation means essentially therapeutics, vaccines, diagnostics, equipment, and protection gear or protection equipment. And those inventions that are contributing to these tools and these objects can be, of course, protected by means of IP and significantly by means of patents. The World Intellectual Property Report for this year, published by WIPO and launched not so long ago, is actually examining the direction of innovation. This is a new type of approach when global IP trends are being examined. And the direction of innovation, even though the main emphasis now is of course on digitalization, it also shows how much health innovation is important and how much IP is relevant in this context. Relating to the pandemic, because the question also contained the reference to the pandemic, there is a very interesting document called the COVID-19 Patent Landscape Report, but because of the lack of time, I will not go into details, but that landscape report, which is only an very early snapshot on patenting activities for vaccines and therapeutics, shows how much IP activity has intensified as an impact, as an effect of the pandemic, and how much the pandemic and its effects has inspired innovators around the world to deal with it and to try to overcome the problem. And what is maybe important to highlight here is how much universities and research organizations have filed in this respect. They were above 40% of all applicants in both fields, and that collaboration was not necessarily reflected in making or filing applications together, but rather in licensing agreements and development and marketing cooperation down the line. So not in the patenting phase, but after the patents have been filed for and potentially also granted. Now, I would also like to invert a little bit the question and saying and not focusing on how IP was driving innovation in the face of health challenges, but how health challenges are driving the IP discourse nowadays. So we can definitely experience a change in this discourse, a change in this discussion globally among member states of WIPO and of the WTO and of WHO as well. There is a renewed openness to discuss certain questions, but there is also a renewed criticism of the IP system. And this kind of antagonism electrifies and invigorates the discussions and sheds light on very, very important aspects of IP protection, and with a very, very sharp focus on access to medical technology. Now, I don't think that in this circle we have to overemphasize the importance of the availability of medicines and related technologies, and how the IP tools are actually facilitating the availability of these tools. But on the other side of the equation, there is the access aspect of it, because IP rights, as we examined them before, are principally exclusionary tools. We have to find a way how they can facilitate access to the technology that is protected by these tools. There are huge geographical differences, and the problem is more horizontal than just being perceived as a single IP issue. And one also has to examine very closely the distribution and procurement channels to understand the challenges that are standing before access to medicinal technology. IP is just one element of that puzzle. What is also a very pertinent topic nowadays is how to ensure emergency access to publicly funded IP, because much of the discourse is actually addressing that issue, that if the certain IP element was developed by the use of public funds, then how can we ensure that the public can actually benefit from those endeavors? And this directs a very sharp limelight on technology transfer issues. At this point, given the shortness of time that I have left, I would also like to direct your attention to the WIPO Standing Committee on the Law of Patents, which is like a discussion forum convening all the member states of WIPO annually, sometimes even 2 times in a year. And it has permanent agenda items that are addressing these very issues. One is patents and health, which addresses information on databases and reviewing the research works that have been done in this field, and the presentation forum of the relevant initiatives that are being carried out in this respect. And there is another permanent agenda item about exceptions and limitations to patent protection, which right now is working on various reference documents that can be used by member states, summarizing the main issues surrounding these legal institutions, of how to curtail patent rights that is still in compliance with various international agreements, but can still serve the public goals of a given country in accordance with their development policies. So this is the slide that I will just fly over very quickly. I'm sure that they will be shared with the participants after the session. I just wanted to make sure that there is an almost complete list of various initiatives, various measures serving transparency in the very, very complex world of patents, hosted and carried out by very different actors, among others WIPO. Very many of these initiatives are hosted or initiated by WIPO, but also other stakeholders, other organizations. I have to highlight the Medicines Patent Pool, which is doing a great job in not only the licensing activities, but also creating databases that make the patent system related to health technologies, related to specific diseases, including COVID-19, to make the patent world more accessible and more transparent for everyone concerned. And finally, I would also like to highlight that there are so many initiatives that were spurred or extended on inspiration of the pandemic, starting with the voluntary measures that companies and right holders are doing in order to address the pressing needs of the global community, including the patent pools for early generic entry with the above mentioned MPP, and patent pledges made by certain entities, ensuring the global community that in certain very closely circumscribed situations, they will not enforce their patents when it comes to technology transfer, when it comes to upscaling manufacturing facilities. The national IP offices have also introduced many actions in order to address the adverse effects of the pandemic. And I have to stress very strongly that the WHO, WIPO, WTO cooperation, this trilateral cooperation, is being enhanced all the time, because that's why that little all-seeing eye is on the picture. Trade, public health, and IP issues, this triangle is extremely important to observe what are the interlinks of these three things. And that is why this study, which has seen its second edition recently, promoting access to medical technologies and innovation, is extremely useful. It addresses many issues that deals with the interlinkages of these aspects. And in 2021, a dedicated COVID extract was also published, and I can only recommend to everyone interested to read this publication. And on April the 11th, a trilateral technical assistance platform was launched, which means that member states who need such assistance can use this one-stop shop and address all three organizations, and the three organizations can come back with the best suited tailor-made advice or assistance to these countries. WIPO, in conclusion, let me just mention that WIPO has also dedicated specific funds to a COVID-19 response package, which has different elements, and all the member states have been briefed about the specific elements or items of it, so I'm not going into detail now. But WIPO is really welcoming any type of request from member states where it can assist them in addressing the challenges presented by the pandemic. And really, in conclusion, I promise I will not speak more. I have to draw your attention to the fact that WIPO is now having a new focus on trade secrets. We are not even in the patent and technology sector. We would not like to have tunnel vision and focus only on patents, because trade secrets is a very important complementary tool in the world of IP, and it also has very important bearings on access issues as well that I mentioned. And to this effect, the next major event that we will have is a symposium on the 23rd and 24th of May, a global symposium in hybrid format. So I can encourage everyone to register. It's still open. You can find information on our website about the second Trade Secret Symposium of WIPO. And these are the words with which I would like to close my presentation. And I thank you all very much for your attention. And I hope you could follow it even in English.
Thank you, Andras, for your words today. Very comprehensive view of what the World Intellectual Property Organization is doing. And we are very pleased also to know that you are also willing to collaborate actively in Latin America, because there are plenty of things that we can also support from our standpoint of view, and the wonderful things that creativity brings here in Latin America. Con eso, pasaré entonces a nuestro siguiente panelista.
Member of the panel, it's really a pleasure, and I'm honored to introduce Mr. Carlos Baños. He's a Chemist General Director of Eli Lilly, Latin America. He is the chair of intellectual property of AMIF. He has been agreed to be member of the panel. Thank you, Carlos. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Fernanda. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this space. Now, the question that I was asked, what conditions required industries related to innovation to get the most benefits as possible in Latin America and to reach the objective of sustainable development on health and sustainable health standards of UN. What is the role played by pharmaceutical industry in the future? And I will take some words of what Eduardo just mentioned. We have a life expectancy which is longer compared to some years. We have been gaining some years of life in Latin America. Unfortunately, these years have not been together with the quality of life that we are desiring, which we find in some other regions. Our next, let's say, scope as pharmaceutical industry is to add more quality of life to all these years and to gain more life expectancy. What do we need from a pharmaceutical industry viewpoint? Definitely innovation. There is no innovation without intellectual property. There's no one will just take a chance. $1,500, $200,000 US for a research that might not be successful if there is not the right aim and to follow. And so intellectual property is playing a very key role. These sustainable objectives of sustainable development of UN has made us to think about what can be achieved in the pharmaceutical industry. Some years ago, a C hepatitis was a death sentence in the short or long run, but now it's something that is curable. There are several products now available that make it easier, the availability, as Andreas was saying. How do we make it possible with these competence to have more players, role players, more investors, and that are willing to keep on with investigations and that they might be awarded. So more players, more therapeutical players will mean that they have everything that they need to do it. Now, the other viewpoint and key point to consider, up to what extent the pharmaceutical innovative industry is going to honestly to reach all these goals, because the borderlines are just exactly where we set them, as I was mentioning as an example, hepatitis C. But let's think about the vaccines, the monoclonal antibodies and other therapies that had been developed so far for COVID in a very short time. A pharmaceutical product is not just an active ingredient, but a key point to be considered, and we have seen this in vaccines, some of them had to be freezed and refrigerated, so it was limiting the availability. When we have more stable formulations, it has been reduced. It makes it easy to reach populations who were not able to get them on time because they did not have the right equipment to keep the vaccines freezing. So we are talking about new therapeutic areas that we have to reach. Let's think about Alzheimer. Let's think about resistant depression, which is a serious issue in health. We want to solve diabetes as it was possible to do so with hepatitis. There is a long road to go, a long way to go as pharmaceutical industry. The heaven is just our limit, but the point is that at present time, the pharmaceutical market does not have all these pharmaceutical medicines that we will require in the future. Medicine development is taking place. That's why we have intellectual property, because we have to devise, to plan, and to manufacture everything based on health. We have to protect intellectual property in all the possible aspects to be able to have more competence, to have more players and stakeholders and more access. Life expectancy to be added in the future should have the right quality of life. Should be years that the person might enjoy, that the relatives they are enjoying together with the elderly. This is key in these development goals, sustainable development goals from the UN, because definitely quality of life is the next barrier that we need to tear down. Innovative pharmaceutical industries playing a very important role, and this is the engine of these additional years with a better quality of life, together with the medicines and the different sectors of health. But medications are playing an important role to gain more quality of life in those years. To close the comment, a medication is not just an active principle, it's formulation, more stable formulation, easy to apply, the doses. This is important. Some years ago, we had this debate whether the reinforcement of vaccines should be with the same initial doses or just half the dose or 1/4 of it. All this requires research, investment, and to have clearly set which is the best way and pattern for the patient to have more efficacy with less toxicity. We are talking about the use to keep on developing opportunities in medicines that might have some action on multiple targets. It's key. This is key. Let's talk about cancer. A product that might be the right one for lung cancer tomorrow might be with a different dose, maybe a different scheme, might play for a role for pancreatic cancer or the breast cancer. That's why we need to protect. And this requires investment. We need to keep to protect it. This will foster competition. Thank you, Fernanda. Thank you very much, Carlos. And well, I have a question for you to supplement your presentation. I want to have your view on, based on your broad development in the pharmaceutical sector, how relevant is it to protect intellectual property for creation of an innovative ecosystem that is appealing private sector investment? It's key, he answers. Now, an area where Latin America is standing out, especially Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico, is clinical research. That's exactly where we have a long way to go to keep on appealing in research that will show the medical staff which are these therapies that will be in the market in 5-7 years. These different types of therapies that the HCP might understand as MOAs, new MOAs, and I think that Latin America has an important role to play in order to appeal all this research, or even to start earlier research. We have to protect intellectual property, whatever it means, in the full extent, in a very efficient way, to make it real. This is what makes the difference for appealing research investment. And that's where in Latin America we have an opportunity. Fortunately, Mexico, the Institute of Intellectual Property, is doing a great job. We are going in the right direction, but Mexico is standing out in the region as a country that is doing its best for intellectual property. We need to reinforce it and to keep on fostering. Thank you so much, Carlos.
For her relatives in Geneva and elsewhere in the world. Thank you for joining us today. And just to start with you a question in order for you to tell us a bit more your thoughts on the matter. What can you tell us about the contribution of the global biopharmaceutical industry in improving health, particularly during the pandemic? Thank you, Kamal.
Oh, please,
of course,
Kamal, open your
Of
mic.
course,
You're
I'm
on
on
mute.
mute. Of course, I'm on mute. I know, and I caught myself. No, thank you so much, Maria, for the question and for having me. I apologize that my Spanish too is non-existent, so I have tried to follow some words and hopefully understood. But if I haven't, I'm really sorry, and I hope at some point you can get a translation of this. You know, when the pandemic started now almost 2 years ago, it was called the novel coronavirus because there was no medicine for it. There was no vaccine for it. There was a reason why it was called novel. And we knew that this was one of the biggest challenges that we had faced in our lifetime, and hopefully the last one, at least in my lifetime. And industry, I think, 1 week after WHO declared that this was a pandemic, a global pandemic, set out 7 principles and said, this is not business as usual. We need to come together, and we are willing to work with anyone that has the technical capabilities, whether it's a university, whether it's, you know, a generic in any part of the world. We're willing to work with our own competitors because this is a global pandemic, and we can only come out of this if the science takes us there. And I'm very proud to say that within 326 days, we had a vaccine that was approved and ready to go out. IQVIA, it's a research-based firm, just came out with the study today, which says that 94% of the time that is taken to develop a vaccine was cut down for coronavirus because everyone came together to address this issue. We also realized very quickly that scalability would be an issue. You know, to get the numbers out, to get vaccines into arms, we have to actually produce the vaccine. And so therefore, you know, finding the right partners, getting into collaborations as soon as we could was even more critical. So, you know, while research-based companies were actually conducting real trials, they were also talking to partners. And one of the largest collaborations that was announced very early on was the AstraZeneca Serum Institute and Oxford, so which is now called Covishield. In many parts of the world, that was announced. So we started with 0, right, on December 26th when the approval came in. Today, we are at 376 collaborations for vaccines alone. We did not stop there, right? The years of research have allowed us to expand our focus also into therapeutics. So you had companies not only just looking at vaccines, but also at therapeutics. And today, despite there being a handful of therapeutics that are approved, we have 191 therapeutic collaborations that are in place. Vaccine production alone today, from 0 in December 2020, is today at 13 billion. We're almost on a surplus because hopefully we have ended the acute phase of COVID-19, though the variants are still coming. We still need to get our boosters, so innovation has to continue. The minute we have more variants, innovation cannot stop. So that's where we are today. But I also want to talk, touch upon what Andreas said a little earlier about the social contract that we have. A lot of people see intellectual property protection as, trying to grab profits and stuff. That's not true. If we hadn't had intellectual property in place, it would have not enabled mRNA vaccines. People now tend to forget because it's 2 years down the line and you have at least 2 mRNA vaccines on the market, that before December 2020, we didn't have any mRNA technology that was viable to be able to put shots into arm. All of this, and mRNA technology has been in the research and development phase for the last 30 years. So, it is a gestation period, but it takes that much time. And if you stop innovation or you stop those incentives, the reaction time becomes longer. And so Andreas spoke about the social contract, and he did mention the World Intellectual Property Right report that came out just a few weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken. And that has a very interesting section, and I'm glad that it came from WIPO, because again, these discussions in Geneva around IP get a little, heated when it comes to health, if I can put it that way. And there are different views, and everyone is entitled to them. But what they did, they projected and it's online, so I'm happy to put that in the link. Andreas, with your permission, to put a WIPO document in the link in the chat. They measured how much was the societal benefit versus what the industry has earned, basis on the innovation. And it's chapter 1, so it's right up there. You don't have to go, should read the whole report, but it's on page 3 of the first chapter. So the societal benefit of the innovation for vaccines is calculated by WIPO at $70.6 trillion with a T for toy, $trillion. Whereas the benefit or the incentive that the industry has got is $79.6 billion. So comparatively, if I wish I could show you the chart, it's a big red circle that says 70 trillion. And then there's a small little dot over there that says 79 billion. But that is the impact that we hope we've had. There is a lot that needs to be done in terms of access. And we are learning from that. And, one of the questions I normally get is, Komal, why just 376 collaborations or 191? Why aren't there more? It also goes back to what our production capacity was in 2020. Prior to the pandemic, the entire vaccine production for the entire world, even for flu and for infants, was 5 billion. And then suddenly we needed 12 billion. So that scalability takes time. And so when we had to enter into these voluntary collaborations with our partners, we were looking at a few things. We needed to get vaccines out quickly at a large scale, and they have to be safe and effective. So we had to look for a partner that had the ability to absorb that technology quickly and then produce at scale, but also have experience and expertise to go through the regulatory hurdles and not get it wrong. Because please don't forget that when you're talking about vaccines, you have to get it right. You're injecting something into someone's body. If at some point of time sorry, do I have 1 minute left? Was that what I was told? Someone said something, and I heard 1 minute, so I'll wrap up very quickly. So basically what we were trying to, in finding that in that very narrow pool, we are at 376, but we have learned, and every day this number increases. I literally have to check with my folks who manage these numbers, what is the latest today? But in 2 years, 376. You've had collaborations like the J&J Aspen one in South Africa, which started as fill and finish. Today is a full technology transfer agreement. So these things do take time, but I'm very happy to say that these collaborations are taking place. Just one more point. I think there is a bit of learning as well that we've got from the back of the pandemic. We need to do better when it comes to access. We do need to look at geographical diversification, but we also need the flexibility to find the right partner. So therefore, and the next pandemic could be different, and this model may not work. So that flexibility is needed. Those incentives, like I mentioned, are needed so that we can react quickly. We can collaborate quickly. We don't talk about the failures that we've had, but we've had multiple failures. They are big vaccine manufacturing companies that don't have a product on market. It's not that they didn't want to get into the they didn't want to provide a coronavirus vaccine. It's just research failed, and that happens. And that is the fact of the matter. So we need that flexibility. We need those incentives. And I do know that if I'm not mistaken, Maria, I'm looking at you and I'm looking at Fernando, that even the Mexican government is looking to update their rules and regulations when it comes to intellectual property. And it's a very collaborative, inviting all stakeholders, looking at the patent legislations, looking at linkages. I think that is the best approach, the collaborative approach, through the Act A that we've had here in Geneva, through COVAX. That is the way to fight this. Multilateral approaches are the way to fight this. Trying to get siloed into, debates of past that are not based in fact, are not the answer to that. And that flexibility that is required, finding the right partners. And, if you were to ask me the question, like, if technology transfer needs to take place, I would be saying the same thing. And a rule of law that promotes incentives, finding the right partners, those trusted partners, having a strong regulatory system, that is what is needed. I mean, there are more factors, but these are the basics that are needed if we have to fight the next pandemic, and we're clearly not out of this. So we will continue to have science lead the way for us, and we would hope and appreciate that the incentives are also protected. So thank you, and back to you. Happy to answer any questions now or later.
Thank you, Kamal. Your words are super interesting with respect to the challenges that this pandemic has brought us here, not only Latin America, but worldwide, and the need of further collaborate and get deeper into collaboration, further on. Because of the time constraints, we don't have more time here in order to discuss with you any other questions, but just, and I'm going now to switch into Spanish once again. Como vimos todos el día de hoy.
Before, the protection to intellectual property, it's a key factor to endorse necessary spaces to innovate in health and to endorse well-being for our society in order to, by using these development health strategies. Pandemic also brought this idea of fighting a virus. Thanks to innovation, we are doing a good job, but innovation is a tool that will allow us to keep on evolving in order to deal with these diseases and conditions as Alzheimer and cancer, the microbial resistance, and also the idea of working with these unusual diseases and conditions, and the relevance to keep on working as a region, as Mexico, as regions that are interrelated one to the other in order to embrace these intellectual property, to protect them, and to keep on contributing for innovation to take us to a well future as society and individuals. Through this panel, members of the panel, thank you very much for being here with us, because we heard viewpoints that are very relevant from each one of you. Thank you so much, especially because you were here with us today. And also, audience, I'm asking you some problems on translation. I'm sure that when we provide all this information on the platforms, we will have the translation. So for me, it's a pleasure to close this panel. Thank you, Fernando and Chris, for this invitation. And we wish you to have a very good closing of this week of innovation. Thank you so much for all of you. countries with violence, they are providing some bad conditions, including Mexico. So from AMIF, we are trying to foster a collaboration project between the George Institute and National Public Health Institute in order to constrain all these impacts of non-communicable diseases in Mexican women. And now this is adding up to a large tradition of AMIF to create some evidence and data to provide international practices closer to population that allows us to improve the health of people and to strengthen the Mexican public health sector. And also some Latin American sister associations have been talking about best practices to make this clinical research more agile in their countries and to free the potential of innovation and to also to strengthen everything for the patient. For example, in Argentina, based on a statement of AMAC for the settlement of these digital platforms, allowed them to increase 79% the clinical protocols that have been approved. Now, Mexico, we have been mentioning this, has a big potential to become a clinical hub for research in Latin America, but we need a common understanding about this opportunity. About that, we are working day in, day out from AMIF. We have been also talked about the importance of cross-pollination and how it has a transforming power in technologies in health. We have put on the table the urgent need to support innovating impale of new generations because they are seeking for a better future. It's not something out of casualty that everything is coming like that. But we are celebrating the same day we opened this week, the 26th of April. This day had been devoted to innovation and creativity that has been impelled by young people. And after COVID-19, anything will be the same. Anything will come back to as it was. As a sector, we have learned the power of partnerships. We have seen the future of medical attention, and it is laying on working hand in hand with technology. We expect that you have found interesting these conversations, and along this year, we you are with us to try to find the right solution in health that Mexico is requiring for the benefit and the well-being of population. Finally, I want to thank the team of AMIF for all this work to create and to cover all these events of the Week of Innovation. Thank you, all of you, for your participation. Chris, thank you very much, and I give you the floor. He says, thank you very much, Rodrigo. Thank you for your leadership, for your big commitment with AMIF. And I would like to mention how relevant it is to have these two panels that we closed on this week, regulatory matters and industrial property, two core topics. Because for the pharmaceutical sector, it's very important for innovation of health as well. As we have heard along these days, this week, medications that are transforming innovative therapies that will change the way we deal with the condition and to alleviate it, new ways to deal with cancer, new ways to treat mental health, the impact it might have into the future, how we need to be ahead of it. This remote diagnosis assisted by artificial intelligence and new therapies are one of the lead goals. And we have all these authorities that are looking and checking the quality and the efficacy of all these medications. This is the gateway of innovation, might be as an accelerator or a curb. We have heard about the complexity. We have heard also with clear examples about other ways how to face it with positive results that have speed up innovation in other countries, to talk about attention strategy to increase and avoid all this red tape and to simplify the processes is being done now by all these agencies. COFEPRIS, as member of ICH, is a very role play of a good play role that is now being played to facilitate an early submittance to new technologies and to new therapies that are innovating. 8 months ago, we started with 80 new molecules. With this committee, we are working hard and we're seeking for the approval. These 89 molecules had already been approved by regulating authorities, but still we are asking. By Reliance, these molecules should have had in 45 days the approval, but now they are just waiting for 8 months. This is an impact for patients, you know. Another information from these 89 molecules, we are just waiting for the opinion of all these molecules, the committee of the molecules, and by taking a sample and compare it with other countries, the result of these 40 molecules in Chile, 30 of them had already been approved. At Panama and Ecuador, 26, and Peru, 25. So we are pleased by these countries because the patients will make available to all this information and molecules. We are just waiting for it to be reduced from the 4.9 years to get all this approval. So the patient will benefit from all these treatments that will change their condition and to heal. In AMIF, we know that this information is clear. We need to create new solutions together with authorities so we make it available for patients. We have the same common objective on behalf of Rodrigo and all the staff, and Rodrigo, who is also the head and CEO of this in AMIF. Thank you, all of you. Thanks to all this innovation, to all this hard work, it's possible to rescue what has been lost along these 2 years. Please take care of yourself, and thank you so much for your big effort.